the priority of any country in international relations, when you're working with it, is to accumulate as much power as possible, to be as strong a country as possible, because that way no other country messes with you, right? Yeah. But what happens when you have that philosophy, that arguably right-wing philosophy, right, is that you have to do some terrible things.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
I'm reading this great book right now called The Inevitability of Tragedy. It takes some of the world's most realistic thinkers, people who are usually regarded as monsters, right? And it's basically saying, hold on, there's a place for people like this. Like, we shouldn't just like shun them. We need to, at the very least, acknowledge what they're saying. The biggest thinker in the book is Henry Kissinger, right? He's the traditional monster of geopolitics, right? This is a guy who, the book also talks about, it in no way condemns, it in no way justifies Adolf Hitler. It's very adamant about how horrific Hitler was, but it talks about him. It talks about Hannah Arendt, Martin Heidegger, some really Leo Strauss, Morgenthau. It's some really big thinkers of the 20th century, basically. And it basically says how, you know, these dark thinkers. So the world sees these people as dark thinkers, right? Oh, you know, how could you listen to them? Oh, this is so impossible. But he's like, no, they're just realistic thinkers. And Henry Kissinger, right? So he's a very controversial figure, very divisive figure. And justly so, I'll always hear someone out on why he's so bad. But the book is trying to be a bit more sympathetic to him. So Henry Kissinger, really interesting guy. His whole philosophy was realpolitik, which is basically saying the priority of any country in international relations, when you're working with it, is to accumulate as much power as possible, to be as strong a country as possible, because that way no other country messes with you. Right. Yeah. But what happens when you have that philosophy, that arguably right-wing philosophy, right, is that you have to do some terrible things. You have to be willing to crush other people. And a lot of people condemn Kissinger because Kissinger's actions led to some horrific humanitarian atrocities in Vietnam, Cambodia, East Timor, and Bangladesh, many other countries as well, Chile. It led to some horrific things. But then Kissinger, for anyone who actually wants to hear him out, always says, well, in geopolitics, when you're at that position, in that top position, and you have to make some really tough decisions, you're two things before I let you come in, because I know you're going to come in, right? One, you always have to choose between the lesser of two evils. And two, you have to balance your ideals with the reality of the situation. That's what he says.
I mean,
and a lot of people hate him for it, but he would then say, well, they don't understand what they're talking about. Oh, and this is the other thing the book said, you know, he said all these thinkers, right? Kissinger, Arendt, Heidegger, Strauss, Morgenthau. So these guys were all realistic and they were conservative thinkers, yeah? They believed in retaining certain traditions, right? They weren't excessively liberal. They weren't excessively tolerant of everything. And he said the author said the reason they all thought this was because they all grew up in Germany, 1910s, 20s, 30s Germany. And Germany of the 1920s, was actually a very democratic country. It was Weimar Germany. It was the most democratic, most free country in the world. It was so free that it allowed people like Hitler to come up and destroy it. That's how tolerant it was. It's so tolerant, we'll allow right-wingers to come and destroy our country. That's how tolerant we are. And for them, this traumatized them, Kissinger and Arendt and all of them. They're like, we don't want that. We don't want that level of tolerance where you can just allow any madman to come up and destroy us, right? So they, for the rest of their lives, they had this balance. If some people say not exactly, but some balance between, hold on, let's not get too liberal where we just accept whatever the hell, you know. Liberalism and tolerance should not be ends in themselves. We should have this sense of skepticism and we should question things and not get too carried away in whatever people say just because it's the thing.